Are you addicted to social media? Well, despite your denials, the fact is most of us are. And not only is there data now available to prove that majority of us are addicted, but just look around you. Look at the behavior of people within your own household, within your workplace, and even when you go to public functions. More people are engaged on their devices on social media as opposed to the people around them who are physically present in the same room. So, how do we free ourselves from this cycle of addiction? Many of us are now embroiled in. I have a special guest to discuss that, and we welcome him. It's Imran Iqbal from Ed Skills, who's an educator. Imran, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for coming and taking your time out. It's a very, very sort of relevant topic of this day and age. And what has been your experience of social media?
I mean, it's definitely relevant. It's very broad. There's many factors, variables. But one thing to take from social media addiction is it varies from person to person. Just the word addiction can be taken out of context, but a lot of psychologists and sociologists are using the word addiction and social media addiction and comparing it to the use of drug addiction. That's how far social media addiction.
So how serious this is now?
Exactly, and as you mentioned, there is a number of research statistics to back this up. And over the last decade, or definitely over the last 2 decades, you can see statistically the link between social media overuse and mental health illnesses such as depression, anxiety, and of course we'll be.
So you think that's actually contributing to mental illness in society?
Research definitely suggests that, and my personal experience, just from looking around, family members, friends, colleagues, you can definitely see it. The overuse. There's a word that psychologists use. It's an abbreviation called nomophobia. I'm not sure if you've come across it.
Nomophobia. No. Yeah, please explain. I thought for a moment you mentioned something else. I was going to shout the answer out to, but okay. Please enlighten us.
It's used by psychologists to describe a condition. It's a detachment from the phone.
Okay.
So it's short for no mobile phone phobia.
Okay.
So
it's similar to FOMO. Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, of course. That's another psychological term that's come about over the last decade or so. With the constant need to log into your Facebooks, your TikToks, your Instagrams to see whether there's that approval, whether that post has received a certain number of likes, whether your WhatsApp message has received that famous double blue tick. And yeah, it's the constant need to not be away from your phone. And that's linked to phone anxiety as well, which is a term that I've come across recently, where a person can't leave their house without at least 50% battery charged on their phone. They just cannot. They have to quickly plug in that USB.
What if you left your house without your phone? What would you be going through then?
If you've left your house without your phone.
Oh, is that even possible these days?
I mean, by accident, possibly.
Yeah.
Well, that's something to look into, actually. That's actually a very good question. Maybe there is a term for that.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a term for that. But it's very, very, very unlikely for a person to leave the house without their phone.
I've done that. I've done that. And I've had to actually drive back home to get my phone.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking, okay, I've left the house, I'll just make do without it for the day.
Yeah.
But no, I was actually compelled to drive back home to pick up my phone, because you think you don't want to be unreachable. You don't want people not being able to get hold of you. There's messages that I may miss which could be critical.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Of course, somebody, a family member or a friend may need to reach out to you. There may be an emergency. If you're doing it for those reasons, then of course makes perfect sense. But in today's day, we live in the digital society. It's a digital era. The 21st century is referred to as the digital era. So you are reachable regardless of whether you have your phone or not. You are reachable whether you are going to your office. There'll be a landline there, of
Yep.
course.
Yeah.
There's Wi-Fi calls. I mean, you've come from a telecommunication background. I'm sure you know there are countless ways of reaching somebody
So the
without.
family knows where you work. So
Yeah,
in the event
yeah,
of an emergency, they can call the switchboard,
yeah,
or they'll know who you're going to be with. They can perhaps call them
yeah.
and get a hold of you.
It's referred to, and well, a phone, I believe, it's an extension to your arm now, isn't it? It's you can't live without it because there's that constant need to check, or there's a form of paranoia to an extent that what if there's a what if scenarios that are built in your head, and that's a link, that's a cause of social media, I would say as well.
Mhm.
That's a cause of constantly the dopamine effect. Now we discussed that lightly earlier on. The dopamine effect is a certain chemical. It's a happy hormone, as they call it,
Mhm.
and I think.
But it's not the same chemical that drug addicts get a rush from.
And that's why it's being heavily related to drug abuse, and the stats with regards to mental illness and depression and anxiety that comes with social media is the same that you would get from drug abuse or drug overuse, should we say. So, yeah, I mean, the main question to ask yourself is, how do you know you have social media addiction?
Good question.
I mean,
Good question.
that's
So
what-
I would deny I do not have, or should we say, social media addiction. I
Yeah.
could definitely say. But if I look at all the social media platforms that I'm on WhatsApp. That's a very heavily used one for myself. I'm on LinkedIn, and now obviously we're on YouTube. But there is always that desire to track and monitor your progress in terms of posts. And I know there's people who are so addicted. I mean, there's a vast majority of people are not even posting anything.
Yeah.
They're probably just looking at other people's feeds, other people's posts.
Comparisons,
But they
yeah.
need to be constantly in touch with what is going on out there. That's
Yeah,
where the
yeah.
fear of missing out is.
Yeah, that's where the fear of missing out is, and that's where comparisons start. Also, where you're constantly, like you just mentioned, you're not having. There are members out there who have social media accounts solely to watch and
Okay.
follow,
Yeah.
whether that be their friends, colleagues, or celebrities, social influencers as they call them. So you're constantly watching these lifestyles that these people have created, and I would say that the majority of them aren't. They're not true. It's a filtered lifestyle. It's fake, as they call it.
Yeah, because
And-
people are going to be posting the best bits of their life
Yeah.
on social media.
Yeah.
I've mentioned before, couples who are posing so romantically with each other, but reality is that they may have a toxic relationship in real life. And apparently there was something in the media recently where somebody killed their spouse, and the same couple were posing romantically on social media. Nobody would have ever guessed that they had actually quite a toxic relationship.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know exactly what story you're referring to. It was a famous TikToker, and of Middle Eastern descent, I believe. And him and his wife on social media seemed like the perfect couple. You know, looking through the world through rose-colored glasses and all that. And but behind the scenes, there was obviously
Different story.
toxic is the word they used. There were definitely some issues there. It led to a breakup. The husband in the relationship managed to sneak a listening device into his daughter's backpack, right? And obviously the daughter was living with the mother. The mother was seeing other men. He obviously overheard the conversations that were taking place and the fact that there were other men in the household, and one thing led to another, and he acted out, and killed his wife at the time, and now he's serving a life sentence.
If you actually look at the lives of these people who post on social media, especially in this Instagram society that we live in now, if you probably see just 10% of their life, what they want to project when they are sort of looking their best, when they're in the best restaurant, when they are on holiday. But if you analyze the rest of the 90% of their lives when they're doing the mundane things, or they're probably walking around the house in their pajamas and slippers, you would not want to follow these people.
Probably wouldn't want to follow these people, but you'll find that a lot of these people's lives, as lavish as they seem on social media, they're just as much as regular as you and I on you and I are 90% of the time. So behind the scenes, they're just a regular person doing their regular thing, and that split couple of minutes they upload an image and really overthink the caption, and that is actually another mental disorder where you're overthinking the caption to try and draw in as much of the attention and of the crowd that you can, to get as many likes as you can. And it's all.
The two things which I've noticed with that, number one, is how many people actually use filters to disguise their real look.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've seen people where they look completely different on social media compared to themselves in real life. So you think, hang on, this is not even your true sort of reflection of what you look like. And secondly, I always wonder in astonishment, why do people need to know what you've had for dinner or lunch or breakfast? I mean, why are you so important that you need to be posting pictures of your food and showing people what you've eaten?
No, that's a good question. And I think a lot of people associate that with, again, going back to the lifestyle of the influencers and the celebrities, they associate the way they look with eating habits. So they want to follow everything like for like, from the moment they step out of the bed to the skincare routine. I mean, that's another thing entirely. I mean,
but you can use filters for that.
You can use filters for that as well, but they want to take it one step further, where they just want to look absolutely flawless. The influencers and the regular user, and it's getting ridiculous. Personally speaking, I mean, I use social media as a regular person. I use it for business purposes mostly. Am I an avid user? No, I'm not. I would say I probably spend about 15-20 minutes. And in that 15-20 minutes, it gives you a very well-rounded idea as to what's happening out there. You don't have to spend countless hours on
I find sometimes that this information can be overwhelming, especially on platforms like LinkedIn. When I'm following other business leaders, or I'm following just checking posts, or who else is my network is posting, it's physically impossible to keep yourself up to speed with what everybody is doing. So majority of the times, like for LinkedIn, when we go on there, when we post, we have this false notion that I'm posting just so others can read my post. I'm on this platform just to share what I want to share. And that's the main reason, not necessarily to read other people's posts, because then it will become, I've got 2,500 people in my network. So how am I supposed to, even if 1,000 of them posted, how can I keep up to speed with what 1,000 people have posted?
Again, very fair point. I mean, you have to ask yourself, why are you on? Like, what I'm trying to say is it's not all doom and gloom. Of course, there are apps out there such as LinkedIn, your Pinterest. There are also definitely positives and benefits to these social media apps. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all, black and depression and anxiety. No, I'm just trying to shine some light.
But before you go on to that, but they are fueling depression in society. So if I'm looking at somebody else's lifestyle and they're posting they're in the best holiday destinations and the best restaurants, and I don't have that lifestyle, then am I not going to feel that inferiority complex in my life, and maybe look at my life and start getting depressed that somebody else is maybe a relative or a close friend has a better life than me?
It's totally natural. As a human, there's always a want. You're always constantly wanting, and it's only natural for you to log into your Instagram and see a cousin or a relative or whoever it is, jet skiing in Dubai or whatever it is, on the Burj Khalifa, whatever it is, and you want that, right?
Or having tea in the Burj Khalifa.
Yeah, or whatever it is. But you live within your means. Okay, it's not all possible for everybody else. Of course, work towards, if that's what you really want, you want that lifestyle. Then of course everything requires you to work and put the hours in, whatever it is, or savings, or if you genuinely want that lifestyle. But it may not be all as beautiful as you see when you cross the other side.
So there's a huge, phenomenal increase in young teenage girls in questioning their gender identity. And these are girls who are being referred for clinics now to change their gender. So what do you think is attributed to that sudden, alarming increase? It has to be social media influences.
Yeah, I mean, I would put it down largely to social media influences, purely because these issues that we're coming across in today's society, if you track back to maybe 20, 30 years ago, I'm not saying those issues weren't there. I'm just saying they weren't heavily fueled by social media. And I think social media, as you quite rightly said, I think the reason why it's happening more and more often is because how easily that information is readily available. The outlet is on a person's phone. The amount of mass marketing, the budgets these companies, these organizations have is just ridiculous. And getting that message across, whether it's to a certain age group or a certain gender, it's very easy in comparison to 20 years ago, or even before the World Wide Web came about in the 90s. And that draws me on to some of the illnesses that are associated, and the influx of mental disorders since the World Wide Web has come about. So since the internet has come about in the 90s, you have to look at how much time people are spending on average on their phones. So in the mid 90s to the early 2000s, I believe it was on average 35 to 42 minutes on a device. And that was a certain age category as well.
At the same time, if you look back at that era, maybe people were spending 3-4 hours watching TV every day.
Yeah.
So viewing habits have just the medium of viewing has changed from television to your phone or your tablet.
Yeah.
But we're still probably are we similar in our viewing habits, where if you add up all the time, are we on 4 hours a day, or would you say we're spending far more than that?
I would say, well, that's a good question. Personally, I think we're spending far more than that, because with the box in the corner, the so-called TV, you were limited to the amount of channels. Okay, it's only after Sky B and Virgin Branson came on board, the variety of channels increased.
You're talking to somebody who grew up with just 4 TV channels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In the 80s, when we were growing up, we only had 4 mainstream TV channels.
Yeah. I mean, and you turned out pretty well, right? but yeah, I would say so. Drawing on the stats, the average 18 to 24-year-old in the 90s was spending between 35 to 41 or 42 minutes on their device. Whereas now, the average 18 to 21-year-old is spending in excess of 2.2 hours, which is about 2 hours.
That's nothing, because we get notifications on our phones of how much on average we're spending in a day.
Yeah.
So if I look at all the video content, all the Zoom sessions that I do on my phone, and general sort of messaging, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah. So the stats are referring to purely social media.
Yeah.
Now, when you refer to the stats of internet usage,
yeah,
because everything runs off data,
yeah,
your Zoom video calls, everything is running off data.
Yeah.
That is a drastic change in stats. Average user in today's age is between the age of 18 to 21 is spending approximately 6.5 hours to 8 hours.
That's more
on the device, right?
Yeah.
So that is you're reaching about 50 hours a week.
Wow.
Okay, and that's a full-time job, essentially.
Yeah.
So
it depends what you're consuming them. Some of us, for my personal consumption, a lot of it's to do with work when I'm here during the day.
Yeah.
So you really need to make an assessment or analyze your own self, how much of that time is used constructively.
Yeah, and it's important to just take a step back sometimes. And this goes with this goes for anything in life. Anything that is, as they say, too much of anything is too much. Right? So sometimes at some point in your life you need to take a step back and maybe look at your phones, the statistics that are drawn in your phones, because the apps tell you exactly how much time you spent
and
on
where
everything.
you spend that time.
Where you spend the time exactly. And just ask yourself that question: am I spending too much time? And I can almost guarantee the answer will be yes. The point of asking that question is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it. And actually, do you want to do something about it? Okay? Because there are smokers out there who obviously know that smoking it's detrimental to your health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's linked to constant illnesses and cancer, and of course, but they choose not to start smoking. So it's a choice essentially at the end of the day. It's just this one, it goes a little bit under the radar because it's so readily available.
It's more acceptable.
More
acceptable.
Exactly.
Yeah. But again, this is going to be probably another topic, another discussion altogether. But how much of that content that we are consuming is the wrong kind of content as well?
Yeah.
Like in terms of children now are being exposed to pornography through social media as opposed to actually going deliberately on those type of sites.
Yeah.
So your children are much more, have a greater risk of being exposed to inappropriate content.
Yeah, there are greater risks, but also they are over the course becoming desensitized. There's a lack of empathy towards things. I'll give you a perfect example. It's happened to me many times. You'll come across a video on Instagram, whatever, and it may be a video on, I don't know, let's pick a topic, some sort of domestic abuse or war. War's a good one, but because of the amount of times you've come across videos related to war-related deaths and crossfire and everything that's related to war, you over time just continue flicking. You don't bat an eyelid. You just literally just continue flicking. And when the topic of what we're doing about, let's just take the Russia and the Ukraine war, for example. What are we doing as members of society to help towards it? Right? A large portion of people will just say, well, they're not doing anything because over time it's become almost part of their world. It's just become part of society.
That's absolutely true, because the amount of violent videos we are all exposed to now, and I think this is also that's also attributing to the violence in society, is because people who are committing antisocial behavior, they now do not think twice before pulling a knife on somebody and slashing them, because they have been exposed to this so much now that for them it's no longer something so horrific. And we're all guilty of this, where, as you've said, you could be exposed to something so horrendous, but even in an instant you can move that video, go to something else which will be more pleasurable, more pleasant to watch, and you've forgotten the horrific video that you were just looking at a few moments ago. So we are all affected. Our brains are being twisted in such a way, in new dimensions, that we will never be able to go back to our old ways again, because the media, through this medium of the internet and social media, is stretching the mind to new dimensions. And one of the other things which I wanted to highlight is how it's affecting our attention span.
Because of the speed at which information is received, that expectation is set for pretty much everything within our lives. Something as small as small talk in the corridor, you don't see it happen very often anymore. I mean, I know when I'm walking past myself in the corridor in my workplace or whatever it is, I don't stop to chat, because my attention is completely on my laptop, which is in my office, and I'm like, right, I need to get back to my office and I need to do such and such before I can go and do whatever it is on my list of things to do. And the free time that I do have, will probably get spent on my social media, which is, again, work-related.
So how is that affecting our relationships?
Well, you're secluded, aren't you? You're very much secluded. You don't have that interpersonal relationship with your parents anymore, with your family members. Everybody is just within their own rooms.
Well, in their own bubble.
Yeah, just completely in their own bubble. And to be honest, I generalize here, and I feel as though everyone seems to think they're in a form of almost a delusional state. Nobody likes to admit that they're in the wrong. But from what I was saying earlier, if you do take a few steps back and actually analyze your life at this moment in time, and actually analyze how much of that time you are actually spending with things that actually matter, and what are you doing about it? Now that's another area I wanted to discuss here, which is what are you doing about it in order to reduce the amount of internet time.
For that, you have to first admit you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And B, you want to resolve this problem.
There has to be a want.
Because if I'm a smoker, I'm enjoying it, I don't want to give up, then you can't help me.
Exactly. Yeah. And but I feel as though it's necessary to explain how simple some of these things are. Okay. And first and foremost.
So this is advice for people who want to break that addiction.
Yeah, who want to break that addiction, or at least reduce the amount of time they're spending on their phones. And it could be something as simple as switching off the notifications for certain apps. Okay. So, for example, if you find yourself spending 2 hours a day on Instagram, and then that's followed up with another hour, and that's generally, it usually tends to happen before you're going to sleep. Right? And that is, again, that's going to take us on to another topic, which is sleep disorder and anger management, and just all sorts of issues that come with that.
Where does anger management come into it?
Well, it's linked to sleep disorder, isn't it? Because you're constantly spending your time scrolling when you should be trying to get your 6 to 8 hours. Now, it's scientifically proven that between 6 to 8 hours is more than suffice for the brain to rest and to be on 100% throughout the whole day, right? But again, we're going slightly off topic here. So, switching off notifications is one thing that you could do. Okay, hobbies. Okay, it's easy to say, but I grew up at a time where, of course, there weren't any phones. I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, and our social time was spent in the garden, cricket bat, cricket ball, football, or down the Conkers, Pogs, Crazy Bones, whatever it was, we were doing it all, and that's pretty much gone. You see it with just the other day, just on the weekend, I was in Bullring Shopping Centre, and probably could have been about 3 years old, kid in his pushchair being wheeled around by his mother, and he had an iPad in his lap.
I think with that, I find a lot of mothers, no disrespect to the mothers or parents, sorry. Let me rephrase that. A lot of parents, fathers and mothers, give a tablet and a phone to child to occupy them, so they do not have to then engage with that child, so they can go onto their own device. Or do whatever they've got to do without having to engage the child. And what's so dangerous is that child is being engaged digitally, not by the parent.
And the parents aren't fully aware of what
they're being exposed to.
What they're being exposed to, what they're watching, whether it's informative, whether it's useful, or whether it's having complete opposite effect. And of course, later on, as they grow up, you may be able to pinpoint certain behavioral conditions to social media. And I think because social media and the internet as a whole hasn't been around long enough for scientists and psychologists for that matter to make it factual. It is very much theoretical at this moment in time.
It's very much jury still out at the moment.
Exactly, but it's when you're looking at the patterns and the figures, it's almost like
it's all there. The evidence, forget the theories, forget the percentages and the breakdowns. The evidence is all around us. When we look at the children of today who don't have the attention span that we had when we were growing up.
Yeah.
They constantly want to be stimulated. You put a child there. When we were young, we used to go, excuse me, we used to go visit our relatives, our friends with our parents, and we'd actually sit there without any hesitation for an hour or two during the whole of that visitation. But now, you try putting a child there, you need to give them the phone just to ensure that they are engaged or occupied. They will not be able to sit silently for all that.
There won't be, and there won't be any form of interaction. You'll get that odd question as you walk through the door into your relative's house, and you'll be like, "Assalamu alaikum, how are you? Did you go to school? How old are you?" And that's it. That's where the conversation ends. And meanwhile, the parents are engaging in conversation back from, talking about things from 70s, maybe even 80s, whatever it is. And the child is left clueless in the corner with his phone or his tablet.
It's a shame, really, because a lot of these kids will be growing up without that skill of having physical interaction with other peers and even sort of people who are older than them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I mean, I think COVID, that time in our lives,
exacerbated that.
Definitely fueled it and even pushed it even further forward. I mean, another stat from COVID is since 2020, early 2020, the use of internet within the homes has quadrupled.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's of course due to the increase of people working from home, and I think most people who work from home actually prefer it because, of course, there's benefits, there's pros to it. You're saving yourself the commute, you're saving yourself money, petrol costs, whatever it is, transportation. But you do miss out largely on that interaction. And I spoke to my brother who was working from home during COVID and said, "What's the one thing that you do actually miss about going to the office?" And he said, "Well, aside from one of the pros was, I don't have to get up early in the morning,
get changed,
all of that stuff. I don't
so
need
work in your pajamas.
Exactly. I don't need to do any. In the winter, you don't have to sit in your car, wait for it to warm up, de-ice the windscreen. I don't have to any of that. However, I do miss the interaction with my colleagues, with my fellow workers.
That's how we learned. When we graduated and we went into jobs, we actually learned from not only our peers, but our mentors, our managers, and our seniors. We learned the jobs and the skills by watching them, how they dealt with customers, how they interacted with people around them.
And I feel as though it's important. I mean, everyone's situation is different. Maybe you are having to work from home, but I think it's important going into the workplace. Interaction with different cultures.
Imran, this is the state of things in the sense that they're here to stay, unfortunately. We once order food, we order it online, we order our groceries, we order a taxi, and even buying clothes. Whatever it is, a lot of our interaction is now online. Even companies do not even advertise their telephone number on their website anymore. They want people to interact with them through social media. So again, this is something which is here to stay. So what are the solutions? Some things which are avoidable, but how do we try and break this cycle of addiction that many of us are in, where we can help ourselves to wean ourselves off or regain some sort of order back into our lives?
Well, I think the first thing you would need to, as we've already said earlier on, is to admit to it. Okay. So the second thing I would say is to limit the amount of app usage. Okay. So
I mean, easier said than done. I mean,
it is very easy to say, but it's just like anything. I'll give it a prime example of this. Being a Muslim, prayers. Okay. Now it doesn't happen overnight. Okay. We can all put our hands up and we can say that we didn't just start off straight off the bat praying 5 times a day. You have to build up to it. Okay, 1, maybe 2, and then inshallah it works out to 5 times a day. Same concept I would apply to your mobile phone. Now there was a want for me to get closer to my God, right? Likewise, there was a want for me to reduce the amount of app and mobile usage and all that. so there has to be a want, and the first thing you can do is to switch off your notifications. Your reminders that somebody has uploaded something, or there's a new post by your celebrity, whoever you're following, and just take an hour break away from it. Okay, I know a lot of people take their phones to the dinner table. Okay,
I know people who take him to the toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, disgusting.
And it's disgusting, yeah, because and again, there's a funny statistic related to that as well, where the mobile phones have more germs than the toilet seat. I mean, that's just saying something as well entirely. So just leave it aside. Nothing's gonna happen in that 1 hour or half an hour that you're spending with your family at the dinner table. It's very important, and you will realize later in life why it was so important. Okay, you may not see it at this moment in time because it's so wrapped up in a bubble, and you're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But believe you me, you will regret not spending that time with your family members and increasing that amount of social interaction. Okay. And as I said, as a Muslim, increase your awareness of your religion. Of course, your Islam teaches us to balance everything. Now, I did not say to remove social media entirely from your lives. There are benefits from that, of course. But however, a lot of things can be misconstrued, and there's a lot of misinformation as well. And that goes in accordance to our religion as well, because as they refer to them, there's a lot of TikTok sheikhs out there, and there's a lot of Instagram, social media sheikhs, as they call them, who have no backing.
You should not be taking religious advice from somebody on social media.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of misinformation, propaganda, and the wrong kind of people out there propagating religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or whichever religion it is. You have to ensure. It could even be health advice, right? When you are going online to get health advice from somebody, how do you know the person you're speaking to is not? What's the difference between an expert, a medical expert, and an influencer? Influencer is somebody who's probably getting paid to push the stuff or the tablets or the sort of fad diet that they are promoting. Whereas a medical expert is somebody who will genuinely know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful who you follow.
Yeah, you have to be very careful who you follow, and it's just like going back onto the health factor that you just mentioned. There's another very interesting statistic here, and this is across the board. This is just taken from a random website. This was backed up by Swansea University, Nottingham University. Countless research has been done on this field. Suicide rates amongst teenagers. At this moment in time, it sits on 71%. 71% of teenagers have thoughts of committing suicide. And just last week, there was a 13-year-old on the local news. 13-year-old girl who committed suicide. Unfortunately, she took her life. And the reason, she wrote a letter. And the letter wrote, "Because I'm not good enough." And that was an impact of social media. So she was constantly logging in to Instagram, seeing the lives of other possibly teenagers or even celebrities, and just a regular 13-year-old, in primary school, secondary school, going about her day, and the parents had no clue of it whatsoever, because she lived this secluded, sheltered life away from the family. And that's why I was referring to earlier, which is to increase that amount of social interaction amongst your family members, because you'll see that, well, you won't see, but later on in life you'll see that it has had adverse effects on your behavior, on your mentality, on the way you go about thinking about certain things. Common sense, not so common anymore. And I think that's a large influence of social media. So notifications, take a step back.
You have, again, we just keep delving back into the harms of social media, and I don't want to keep talking about that because we want to quickly talk about the solutions. But there are an awful lot of groups out there. No matter what fetish, what interest, what sort of like that you have, you'll always find like-minded people on the internet. Like, remember, there's suicide, self-harm groups that
there's an NHS helpline.
There's that famous incel movement, the guys who hate the women and have actually gone and acted out those evil intentions of harming women because there's a group of men, like-minded men, who, for one reason or another, have not been successful in life with women, and they end up hating women.
Yeah.
So you have such dangerous places that people can gravitate towards as well. But let's focus on the solutions now as to if somebody admits that they have a problem. So we've mentioned about notifications, removing some of the apps. I mean, the couple of that I can add to is get rid of your smartphone and buy the old brick Nokia phones. Maybe that's an option.
Yeah, it is an option. It's not an option I would suggest straight away, maybe, but you can build up to that. Because if your sole purpose of holding or carrying a mobile phone is purely for communication and you're reachable,
that phone will do the trick.
Then that phone will do the job. Yeah. But if you're trying to kid yourself, then I would suggest, as I said, reducing the amount of time by switching on notifications and stuff, and having a clocking off time. Now there are apps out there which disconnect your Wi-Fi and your 5G and switch it onto airplane mode and bedtime mode. I think I've got on my phone, and everything switches off. So I'm not reachable unless I have that person's number as an emergency contact, such as my wife or my.
I know a friend who, I can't remember the time he told me. I think he probably mentioned it was probably by even 7 or 8 o'clock that he switches his phone off completely and doesn't then switch it back on till the following morning. I thought that's absolutely fantastic, if you are able to do that. So you switch it off completely and you're not reachable. In most cases, as I said, if you're at home in the evening anyway, most of us are with our loved ones anyway who need to contact us in an emergency. And if anything, you can give people a emergency landline number if they really need to get hold of you. So I thought that was a great tip.
That's a good one. I mean, personally, what I've started doing not so long ago was weekends. I've started off with weekends, whereby weekends is solely family time. I'm reachable, however, I tend not to respond. To make people aware that I am no longer reachable on the weekends, I'll get you on Monday. So there was a number of clients that were trying to reach me on the weekends. I no longer answer their phones.
And the other one what I can think of is rather than checking your phone constantly, you set a time aside during the day that, let's say, every 2 hours I'm going to check what messages I've got. Or I'm going to take unless somebody rings me, I'm taking my phone out of my pocket. Otherwise, I'm not touching that phone if I don't have to. And every 2 hours, I'll just check what messages I've got. Rather than, as you've said, be dictated by those notifications and the beeps and the tweets, and then responding at the same time as well. So that makes yourself, you're creating that perception to the others that you are constantly available, reachable, accessible, and so if you create that habit that you're responding to people's messages instantly, and the one time that you're genuinely busy for a couple of hours, you're unable to respond to them, they are going to get literally cheesed off with you.
And you create this standard that you are reachable, and the moment that you do not respond to a friend or a family member, they immediately think something's wrong. Right? And you need to draw away from that. It's not something that happens immediately. You have to take a step back at a time.
The other one I can think of is, why do we need to follow so many other people on social media? Probably the vast majority of them are irrelevant to our lives. Why do we need to know where a certain celebrity's gone for holiday, what he's eaten for breakfast and what statement he has made or who he's dating or she's dating? It's absolutely irrelevant to our lives. So we need to basically unfollow a lot of these people that we are following.
I mean, replace if you unfollow the celebrities and maybe start following somebody, an influencer who could bring some form of benefit to your life. Okay, something that you can take away from them. I mean, what I would say, one point I would add to this is, if you do have that much free time in your hands where you're burning away 3 to 4 hours on your mobile phone, then redirect that time towards something that you're possibly more passionate about. Or, considering we're in a living crisis and we're both from business backgrounds, maybe invest that time into a business of some sort, creating a surplus income. Maybe you're not happy with your 9 to 5 job, of course depending on your age category, but turn it into something more positive. That time that you're spending.
Well, Imran, thank you so much. That's been very informative. We are coming to the end of our program. And what we have shared today, obviously there's a wealth of tips there that each and every single one of us can implement in our lives to be able to completely wean ourselves away from social media addiction. And the fact is, majority of us, myself included, have some form of addiction, or we are spending more time than we should, and we should be redirecting that time to other things which will actually benefit us. And one of the things that comes to mind immediately is at night when you are on that phone flicking through all those different videos or messages, grab a book, sit there or lie in bed, read a book. And that's when you will really feel the joy of detoxification, and you will find pleasure in something that genuinely over the centuries and decades has historically given people pleasure. When they actually pick up a book in their hands and smell that paper and let their imagination take over. And that it really is a serious tip from myself to yourself, if you are genuine about wanting to reclaim your sanity.